מצווה גדולה להיות בשמחה, להיות בשמחה תמיד. מצווה גדולה להיות בשמחה, להיות בשמחה תמיד. מצווה גדולה להיות בשמחה, מצווה גדולה להיות בשמחה, להיות בשמחה תמיד. La 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 la. One more time, please. Mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha, liot b'simcha tamid. Mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha, liot b'simcha tamid. Mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha, mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha, liot b'simcha tamid. It's a great mitzvah to be always happy. But sometimes we're sad. Sometimes we don't know how to be happy. What should we do then? The Rebbe's say, you can't be happy all the time. Sometimes you're sad. Allow yourself to feel sadness. For maybe an hour a day, max. Rest of the time, be happy.
What's the proof text?
What's the proof text? You're quoting from Fiddler on the Roof. Okay. Okay, so I have a lot of material tonight. It runs the gamut. I think the program would run about 45 minutes, maybe a little longer if you interrupt a lot. And I want to start back in 1969. Last summer, have any of you ever seen our storage unit? Have any of you ever seen our basement or our attic at Essex Street? Did you think we had a lot of boxes?
Yes.
Well, most of them are in our storage unit now, although we did succeed in getting rid of several hundred. There's a lot of treasures there, and there's a lot of things that need to be sorted through and thrown away or recycled or donated or sold or something like that. But we don't have time to do it all in one summer. And we didn't have hardly any time there this year. This year we're taking inventory. We're writing down the contents of every box in our notebooks, and then we'll type it up, and that way we'll be mapping the place and we'll know where to find things when we are ready to take the next step. Some of the things we donated to the Magnus Museum, which is housed at the Bancroft Library now, especially things of historical value about the Jewish community in the Bay Area. There's also a lot of personal things. And when I was going through one of the boxes last year, I found a scrap of paper that I thought I would never see again. I scanned it into my computer. It looked something like this, but smaller and more wrinkled. It is a broadside that I wrote in 1969 and handed out on the streets of Manhattan. I was going through some changes, and I needed to communicate my discoveries to the people. And so I wrote this up. I typed it on a QWERTY typewriter. What do we call this typeface? Typewriter typeface? It's got a name. Courier? Yes. Courier typeface. And on a machine with a ribbon. And I took it to like a copy place on the Lower East Side, I think think they did like a little photo offset and then they ran a copy. They didn't have like the wonderful Xerox machines like we have today, routinely making copies for you, or desktop printers either. So I made 25 copies and I handed it out on the street corner, and people smilingly took my offering. The 24th person, I felt, wasn't so happy to get it. I felt a little skeptical expression across his face, so I stopped giving them out. That was good that far. And turns out I still had one left. I didn't think I'd actually saved one. I thought I'd given them all away, but here it is, or a facsimile thereof. So I'd like to read you what I wrote and handed out to the people in 1969. A lecture entitled, "If you don't want to hear me, you don't have to come." I want to speak to you tonight about some matters I have learned about through my own experience. Some of you will believe what I say and will to act accordingly. Others will seek to disprove what I say and trip into the same bog by their own strenuous method. Yes?
Could you back away from the mic?
This is the first time anyone's asked me to back away.
Back up.
It's a little fuzzy.
Well, I needed to know that. Thank you.
Just move it this way.
Move what?
The microphone.
Move the microphone away?
It's better when you're not as close.
Well, if I just step back, it's the same thing. It's easier for me to step back than for the microphone, too.
I have a candidate.
Okay. I haven't said anything yet. I'm back to projecting. This is why these tapes needed editing. Okay, so let me tell you now, as an aside. Perfect now. Oh, okay, now I'll go back to what I was doing. The aside is that we recorded the reading I gave last year on the same date, July 25th, wrong century, 2012, and it was a Wednesday, not a Thursday. In other respects, it could have been now, numerically one off, but actually a day off and a year later, so it's not the same quite. But anyway, we recorded it. My friend Andy Alpern in Spot edited it. Hi, Corey. And we produced, I think we made 18 copies of a DVD version of that recording of that reading. And there are about 8 of them left or 7 of them on the back table, and they're for sale for $18. With it, you will get, if you give me your email address, an electronic copy of the texts of the reading, so that if there are some problems with the mic or with my delivery or with my projection or with my speech impediment or anything like that, you will be able to follow the text, whether you can hear me properly or not. So that's a great thing to have in mind when the reading is over. Okay, so I was reading this paragraph about where I was at in 1969. Do you remember what I was saying? Sort of? Okay. This is all by way of introduction. Those who have chosen not to come, hoping to be unaffected by me, are the most interesting to watch, for they will either escape the orbit, their comet's orbit, or crash ignominiously in the same somewhat melancholy direction. Therefore, my words are really hoping to help those who can to escape the spiral, and those confined to help them. Stand on me, let me help you, and recognize that I am your equal, since all my efforts will be vain if you do not work faithfully. What happened to me was very simple. I went back home and had things like this to say, but no place to stand on to say them. And so nobody listened to what I had to say and had to learn them, and I wasn't learning anything new. When you go home, make sure you have 1, money, and 2, a place to stay. The money is not as important as a place to stay, since you can always make some, and if it's your friends, you won't have to pay anything until you do. Be the master or mistress of your own fate. Don't give any people reason to think they can assume this protectorship over you. That is how you can gain what you most desire. Shrug watchwords. Like if someone says parent figures, understand that they are probably deeper into a hang-up than you, and by their own mouth do they call attention to themselves. Now that's saying too much, but do you see what I mean? And don't be alone too much. It's not any better, or any worse, I might add. So if you want to be alone, don't think it deserves any apology. I know you think this way anyway. I'm assuring you, it's cool. 30s humor or Ebbsfield baloney, the great popularity contest, okay, now getting on a Tim Leary trip, other people you can like, other people, the necessity of descent to learn, the beauty of the peroration. Alas, it is only old people who will read this and be foiled by the gratuitously cruel young. If you imagine a red nose boring through a tunnel, a tubular track, and glistening in the general flare of a microlight, you will see how life goes on. And it's signed Robin, one of my aliases. Okay, I don't know if you make any sense out of that, but I thought it was kind of interesting. There I was. Okay, so when I found that piece of paper, I was so happy. I almost danced a jig. What did I say you did over and over again? I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I found it. It still exists. Because when you give stuff away, you don't know what's going to happen to it. I gave a lot of stuff away. Does it go into some bottomless pit? Does it go into someone's garage or storage unit? Does it get sold on the black market? Does it get composted? Where are those little booklets, those little handouts? I run across them all the time when I'm in the unit. They're in storage. They're waiting to be discovered. So I rediscovered my own writing, and now I've shared it with you. Don't have to applaud.
Tell us what you said last year.
You may be puzzled. Okay, now, I've been working on a series of stories. They're basically autobiographical, memoir-type pieces. I try to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And you don't have to believe it. You could think that I'm making it up or I'm embellishing or exaggerating. I'm certainly selecting. I can't tell you everything. No one ever can. That's why there's such a thing as literature. A concentrated form of revelation. This is called Coast to Coast, June and July. In the summer of '69, I was living in the half of a yellow wood frame house that my college friend Steve Keller had rented in Hyde Park, a small town near Poughkeepsie. I had moved there at Steve's invitation after my stint as an occupational therapist at Suffolk State School in Melville, Long Island, had expired. The invitation had been an offhand one, though extended with Steve's customary impulsive generosity while I was there on a visit. Nevertheless, I took him up on it, and after arranging for a co-worker to take over my apartment in Northport on Long Island Sound, I decamped for Steve's place with all of my portable worldly possessions in the '64 Pontiac Le Mans that my father had given me. It was a depressing time. Under the rules imposed by my draft board, I was obliged to continue to seek work that could be categorized as alternative service to fulfill the requirement I had accepted as an approved conscientious objector. The job on Long Island, the first of its kind I had found, was a temporary one of 10 weeks duration. I had lasted 9.5. I sought other employment in Dutchess County, the region on the Hudson where I now lived, but did not succeed. Steve moved on to his next venture, and I remained in the house alone till the month he had paid for would be up. In this vacuum, I listened to my records, Cream and Mad River, and sank deeper into a cold funk. I struggled to find my footing, to find meaning and direction in my hobbled state. Even when the moon landing had occurred on July 20th, an event which Steve and I had watched at a neighbor's house, I felt no exhilaration. Now that he was gone, I bicycled aimlessly around, threw the I Ching over and over, and lay on the floor, pausing only to write down my dreams. One day, the telephone company sent out an agent to remove the phone. He knew there should be 2 extensions on the premises, but could only locate one. He asked me where the other one was, and I inarticulately pretended not to know. Why help the government or anyone with official status? In the midst of this debilitated frame of mind, I even neglected to carry out the garbage. Among the items in the paper bag were some discarded pieces of cooked liver. When the smell of rotting meat reached my nostrils, I attempted to lift the bag in order to dispose of it. But the bottom fell out, and the pieces of liver ended up on the floor. When I reached out to pick them up, I saw that they were crawling with maggots, from which I recoiled, as much from the sight as from recognizing what it reflected about my inner turmoil. I somehow scooped them into a fresh bag, their oozy, clammy bodies sticking to the floor, seemingly ready to compost themselves right there. I knew I had to get out of that place, but I understood that part of my mess would inevitably be left behind. By driving away, I was able to escape the stench, but the matter of the phone followed me and ended up on Steve's bill. When I visited him at his parents' home in Brooklyn, and once again attempted to deny knowledge of its whereabouts, Steve's mother, not at all deceived, kindly noted that all of us sometimes make mistakes. My silence gave assent, and knowing that my dereliction had been uncovered, with lowered eyes, I accepted her gesture of forgiveness. Coast to coast, August and September. I easily caught the small garter snake a few moments after I left Kay's house in Larkspur for what turned out to be the last time. I had found it in the brush along the road and decided to keep it as a talisman until I should find another spot in the wild from where it could safely continue its life journey, just as I needed to continue mine. My journey by foot and by thumb and by freight hopping and drive-away had taken me from New York to Marin County to seek out my once beloved, to whom it was now clear I could not afford to be attached anymore. As I began a new journey, bereft of her, I chose a snake, the symbolic meaning of which was obvious to me. As a companion, I knew from experience that this type of snake was not dangerous, was even tame, and at this age, it was the smallest garter snake I'd ever handled, almost helpless. Even though snakes of any size excite fear in the hearts of many people, I had learned from my fellow nature boy, my camp friend Mike, that they make excellent pets. My connection with Mike, too, had withered, and I would have to search him out if I wanted to renew it. Capturing and then carrying with me a small garter snake, in emulation of Mike, was a way to include him once again in my life. My rambling walk took me through a wooded area bisected by a winding suburban road, through a part of town not yet completely urbanized, but a far cry from the trackless forest on the flanks of Mount Tam it had once been. Inevitably, I found myself coming closer to the metropolitan maze of San Francisco, even though I was still on the northern end of the Golden Gate span. The sun was hot, and I grew tired and discouraged. I was finding no new vistas, but rather a cluster of roads, all leading inescapably to the freeway that led back to the city from which I had headed north that morning to learn whether I still had a lover. Now, facing a difficult return journey, with the sinuous snake growing limp in my hands, I had run out of good places in which to leave him. All I had encountered by now was a dusty triangle of withered grass and stunted bushes, bound on three sides by traffic, over which I must cross to find a ride, and where I had to leave the snake while it was still alive, though weakened and parched, like me. I put him down and hoped he'd find some nourishment in this unlikely and ill-favored place. I had feared for him if he should try to cross the road. I regretted having plucked him from a safer environment and brought him to this barren island, away from others of his kind, isolated and dispossessed. My journey would continue. There, his would probably end. Okay, so it seems like we have a theme of journeys coming up, unbidden, by clairvoyance or kismet. This started as a journal entry. I think most of you will remember when Yehudit and I started spending time in Israel that we wrote letters to our friends in the States, and I specifically kept a journal, and I sent rather irregularly, but fairly often, segments of the journal, and I called it Journey's Journal, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, and so on. So I don't remember for sure if this one was one of them. It may have been, but if it was, not everybody here has heard it, and if it was, those who have heard it may have forgotten it, or at least not remembered it in detail. So I'm going to read it now, and it's really one of my favorite pieces of writing. It's, first of all, you know who Shira Israel is? Rabbi Shira Israel? She's a Gaval person. She was raised in Iran. She was awarded a scholarship to study at the Sorbonne. And the only thing she had to do was curtsy to Queen Soraya, the Shah's wife. And she refused to do it. So they took away the scholarship. So instead of going to Paris, she went to England, I believe, and although not really knowing the language well, she eventually acquired a degree in electrical engineering. She moved to California, she worked in Sunnyvale, and eventually she got the call. She discovered she was pretty psychic. She started giving people readings. And then she met David Wolfblank and asked if she could study with him to become a rabbi. The music is cued in perfectly, whoever it is. So she eventually gained a position as the apprentice, let's say, to Rabbi Joseph Heckelman at Kilat Shalva, the Masorti synagogue in Tzfat. A low-profile, low-key Beit Knesset for Jews who identified as conservative. It was egalitarian, it was user-friendly, and Rabbi Heckelman and his wife Tzipora basically ran the place. Tzipora taught classes in Torah to her students. Rabbi Heckelman led services. Their son Yakub is the owner today of Olam Katan, the spiritual bookstore in Jerusalem. And their daughter Sarah is a realtor, I think, who once did some business with her.
She's the director of Beth Israel Judea.
She's now the director of Beth Israel Judea. I so admire her. So, the day that we arrived in Tzfat to take up residence, which was just before Tu B'Shvat in 2001, and we arrived then partly to attend Moshe Chaim and Tanya's wedding. Rabbi Heckelman, who had been ill for about 10 years, died. And Shura took over the post as rabbi of that congregation. She maintained her residence in Jerusalem. So the next year, when after we had to give up our apartment and wanted to move back to Tzfat, she invited us to live in the Rabbi and Rebbitzin's house, because she was only coming up like twice a month for services, and the Rebbitzin was residing in Jerusalem and coming up once a month. So there's room for us to be there and to have them come in as our guests sometimes. So that's how I met Shura. But at the time of the writing, Yehudit and I were visiting her in Jerusalem. June 4th to 7th, 2002. So we're all packed up and we're fairly sure the bags don't exceed the legal weight limit. I stand on the scale and it registers 70 kilograms. I lift up a heavy suitcase and the scale registers somewhere in the 90s, so I'm clear. The legal limit is 32 kilograms. The carry-ons have a 20 kilogram each limit, and we're underweight with those too. We're set to make a tikkun on last year's trip from Boston, described in excruciating detail in an earlier journal entry when we had to pay for an extra box to handle the overflow and scramble around on the terminal floor to shift our belongings from bag to bag or bag to box. You've heard of Ben Bag in Pirkei Avot? He's the rabbi who taught, turn it and turn it, for everything is in it. Look deeply into it, grow old and gray over it, for you can have no better portion than it. Okay, he was talking about the Torah. In any case, I'm a disciple of Ben Bag. Ben Hey adds, the reward is in proportion to the effort. I load up the car, we say goodbye, and we drive through Jerusalem toward the airport. We note how last year traffic was stopped on this very road, and we traveled 2 blocks in an hour and a half, a delay that almost prevented us from catching our plane. We arrived 7 minutes before takeoff, and only through what has to be regarded as a miracle or divine intervention were we able to get on the plane. Another story for another time. This time we know with pleasure the way is clear, and we reached Ben Gurion at 10:30 for a 12:55 a.m. flight. Not too bad. Yehudit rolls down the driver's side window to give the security personnel at the airport entrance a chance to glance about the interior, and then they wave us through. There are 2 terminals now, but apparently the first one is for cargo and the other for passengers. We drive up to Terminal 2 and park alongside the curb in front of the first car in the row. I get out to grab 2 luggage carts and wheel them to curbside. Yehudit and I unload the car and pile the bags in some balanced order on the 2 carts. As I remove the last article from the trunk, I notice a slender, dark-complected man with tight, wavy hair, holding a pelephone and walking, slightly stooped in the road alongside the car. He looks into the trunk as I slam it shut. I assume he is performing some security function. Yehudit has also noticed him. As I push the two cars toward what I suppose is a functioning entrance door, I ask her to help me with one of the carts. I remember from last year how heavy and awkward two loaded carts can be to manage. She comes over and begins pushing one of the carts, at which point we notice that the first three entrance doors are blocked. Only the main entrance, midway along the terminal facade, is open. It is located about 15 yards away. Then she remembers that she left her new fanny pack on the front seat and turns back to get it. I wait for her and hear her cry, "I can't find it!" She sounds frantic, but I have to stay with the luggage. "Call a cop," I yell. Okay. So, in her fanny pack, which she had just gotten from a regular photography store in Svat, was her camera, 2 exposed rolls of film, several credit cards, her California driver's license, a small address book, her Kaiser card, about 70 shekels, and, most important of all, her passport. We find the security guard, whom we question about the situation, and who questions us about the circumstances of the theft. He sends Yehudit to the police station, and after about 10 minutes, she returns with 2 officers. One of them escorts her to the ticket counter, while the other walks all over the terminal with me, looking into every trash container, including those in the men's rooms, for a trace of dumped purloined possessions. After a fruitless search, I meet her at the counter and learn that without a passport, she cannot fly out of the country. Even if Air Canada allowed her to take the first leg of the flight to Toronto, she would most likely not be able to leave Canada and enter the U.S. without appropriate documentation, which can now only be obtained from the American Embassy in Tel Aviv. They could book us on the next flight, leaving 2 days hence at 12:55 a.m. on Friday, but we would still have to go to the embassy with a police report to obtain a document certifying that her passport had been stolen. So we load up the car again. I'm getting to be an expert and drive to the police station. There, the officers on duty take a thorough inventory of every missing item and hear our story of the theft again. Yehudi calls Shira, who sets to work canceling her credit cards while we drive back. A little karmic background on this episode might reveal why our adventure took such a turn. We were going to Boston to meet the new baby, our 3rd grandchild, that Natasha was due to bear to Sandro on June 1st. We had picked a June 5th return date so as to accommodate the family's wish that we arrive after the birth. However, at this point, the baby hadn't yet been born, so we were now in violation of our original goal, were we to keep to our travel plans. Again, it took some kind of divine intervention to create a delay, for we weren't going to pay $300 to change flights. Okay. Under these circumstances, however, there would be no fee for the change. Thus, as in one of Shlomo's stories, the little thief is really Elijah the prophet. We returned to Shira's apartment, and Yehudit spent some time on the phone confirming the card cancellations. 2 of my cards are not duplicates of hers, so we are still able to extract cash from a sidewalk teller machine, if we need to, and to charge purchases. In the morning, before we can gather ourselves to make the trip to Tel Aviv, Yehudit, at my suggestion, prepares to call the police, just to see if, on the odd chance, her belongings have turned up. She offers a short prayer to the Almighty. God, it would be so nice if I could get my things back. Approximately 30 seconds later, Shira calls out from her bedroom, "Yehudit, there's someone on the phone who says she found your things." And here's the story of that adventure. At Beirut Yitzchak, a kibbutz about 10 kilometers from the airport, a woman named Nitza Heller was out for an early morning walk when she noticed a blue pouch and several items, including credit cards and a passport, scattered in the grass alongside a traffic circle next to a shopping center. In an address book, she found the number of a friend of ours, Ray Fishman. She called Ray, who apparently gave her our previous number in Svat, that of her friend Margaret, who was now living in our former home. Margaret evidently gave her Shira's number, for she knew we were intending to stay there. And so we drive out to the kibbutz instead of the American Embassy to pick up Yehudit's belongings. We meet Nitza, a very unassuming woman who won't even consider taking a reward, and a friend of hers, a man who made Aliyah from America some 25 or more years ago, who translates for us. Nitza takes us to the place where she found the items, and there, in the grass, at the edge of the traffic circle, Yehudit finds a few more cards and a roll of film. All that's missing finally is the camera, which had a broken film compartment door, the partly exposed roll inside it, and about 70 shekels. We're totally grateful to the woman and to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing, for helping us through this strenuous passage. The trust we placed in the Eibishter an affectionate Yiddish name for God, referring to the top of a pestle, is always confirmed. On our way back to Jerusalem, we realized that Victor and Nadja are coming in today with Amitai and Ricky, and would very likely be stopping at Nadja's grandfather's home. We last saw him 2 years ago and could have met them there, as his town is located in the same direction we were going, but really, we've been through a lot today, and they need their own time to reconnect. If we miss a reunion here, there'll be another one at Ruach HaAretz in July. We're pretty fried. Need to shower, change, and settle down. We keep going. At Shira Israel's in Jerusalem, I'm doing the final repack for our trip to Boston. Until now, I've kept the Reb Shlomo Haggadah in the duffel bag or the suitcase, which will be checked in for the flight. Taking it with us rather than leaving it in storage in Sfat, where we expect to be for next Pesach, was itself an illogical choice, but I'm drawn to some of the stories and teachings in the volume, especially this one. Here's a very simple thing, and I'm sure you'll share my feelings about it. I'll explain to you with a parable. A young man is looking for a shidduch. He meets a young woman, and on the first date she says to him, "Tell me about yourself." So he says, "I'll tell you. My first wife ran off after the chuppah. My second wife didn't even show up. The third wife I don't even remember. What does she do now? You should go into think, Gewalt, what a shidduch. When are we getting married? No, she'll look at the clock and say, Oy vey, I have a very important appointment." This is mamish what we're doing to the world. Here's a new generation, and we come to them and we're saying, this one wanted to kill us, this one killed us, this one is thinking of killing us. Imagine if I'm a little goy. I live in the big city. I know nothing of Yidden. All I know is that everyone wants to kill them. There must be something wrong with them. And this is all we're talking about to our children. I go to Shira, who's busy making dinner for us in the kitchen, and I ask, "Can I read you a passage from this book?" "Sure." So I start to read these 2 paragraphs, but first I back up and read the one preceding them, which gives the background. Again, Mrs. Shlomo speaking. "I was invited to Warsaw by the Art Theater to give a concert, and the greatest miracle happened. I arrived in Poland with about 20 people, and we were greeted by the television. We gave 7 concerts. Sold out isn't the word. Thousands of people came. People in the street greeted me with so much respect and simcha. You know, it's clear to me that if the Goyim ever begin to love us, it'll only happen when they see a Yid with payas and a yarmulke." Shira responds with a story of how when her daughter Yael was 5 years old, she came home from Hebrew school and began telling her what she had learned in class that day. "You know, Mom," Shira remembers her saying, and this might be a paraphrase, "everyone is trying to kill us." Suddenly I remember the Purim skit. Teachers staged with the children in Gan Avraham, the preschool of Congregation Beth Abraham in Oakland, where I taught Hebrew school for a couple of years during the tenure of my friend, Rabbi Joe Schoenwald, and where my sons Yeshaya and Elishama attended Gan, as well as the Hebrew school. Barbara Ogman was the principal of Gan Avraham during all those years, and with her assistant and collaborator Ellie and the other teachers produced the holiday-appropriate events. I start describing the skit. The part of the skit I want to stress that is a counterpart to her story about Yael. But first I have to back up to frame the context. I remember the song that introduced the enactment. It's a simple repetitive stanza with a key word changing with each repetition. In my trunk is my Purim costume. In my trunk is my Purim costume. In my trunk is my Purim costume. Come along, all aboard for Shushan. And in each stanza, another Purim-related article is introduced. The Megillah, Haman's 3-cornered hat, a Hamantashen, all memory markers for the children. But now, I'm already choking with tears. As soon as I open my mouth to sing, I say I can't do the whole thing because I'm going to start crying. But I can't not sing it all, as much as I remember, or enough to give the gist of it, and now I start to get to the main point. The thing about this skit that I always remember, I explain, is how age-appropriate it is. There are the familiar characters, the king, Vashti, Mordecai, Esther, and the court officials. But nothing is introduced or said that is beyond the children's comprehension or that might overwhelm their sensibilities. To hear these little children reenact the conflict at the heart of the story in concise dialogue is itself moving, but when they break into song, the scene becomes emotionally even deeper. The key line for me was when Mordecai reveals to Esther the prime minister's sinister intention and the point of the king's proclamation: to hurt all the Jews. Not to kill all the Jews. That would be beyond what a child of tender years could comprehend, but to hurt. That is something I might experience on an everyday basis. something that is painful yet true to their own experience. And to hear a child use that key word, hurt, whose meaning he could understand, brought the depths of this fiendish plot home to me in a way I had never heard it before. And telling it to Shira opens the floodgates of emotion into me now. I reach out for a hug as I let myself cry. "Why are you crying?" she asks. I reply, hardly able to get the words out. "I don't want to leave Israel." And there's another reason I'm crying too. There are so many funerals today. For this is the day after the day a car bomber blew himself up while driving next to the Tel Aviv to Tiberias-bound Egged bus, killing 16 people, most of them young soldiers returning to their base. 13 of them are being buried today in many different locations, in many different cemeteries, with an hour-and-a-half interval between the funerals of those being buried in the same sacred enclosures. It sometimes takes a day for the news to sink in and the new grim reality to be grasped. She comforts me and says, "We are a very misunderstood people. Due to the change in plans, few people know we're still in the country. We pay a final visit to Joe and Ro, where I note that I'm still pretty out of it. Floating and go to Yaakub's class at Olam Katan, where he's teaching from a translation he's done of Reb Nachman's teaching from Lukitei Ma'aran on the role of a tzaddik. It's a fitting conclusion to our annual cycle, since it's in his mother Zipporah's house that we've been living this past year, and the teaching is an apt reflection on the process of purification an individual must undergo to stand naked before God. Back at Shira's, we zip our suitcases shut and weigh ourselves and them, deducting our weights, and determine that this time, again, we beat the limit. As we're starting to wheel them out to the car, Avram Leader comes by to pay a visit and reminds us that his nephew Eben, with whom Nicole led Pesukei de Zimra at the Leader Minyan, is working in Boston. Who knows? We might even see him on Shabbat. So we get a Nasiya Tova from Avram too, and a hug goodbye and a blessing from Rabbi Shira, and we're mamash on our way. Heavy stuff. Shem. So, I think it was last year. Yeah. Yeah.
For the sake of the video,
Yeah.
could you move the mic a little bit away from your face, to the side,
Yeah.
and still have the microphone quality?
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. Okay. Oh.
Thank you.
Anybody have any Kleenex? I mean, I don't want to ruin a perfectly good handkerchief. I hate to use it for that. It's good, this is for, a kinyan or something like that. Okay. Thanks. Okay. How is that? Is that good? It's not a chauffeur. I just want to notice that I actually know, I'm personally acquainted with everybody in this room, and I know I love you all, and I really am so pleased you came out tonight. We do this every year, and we'll do it as long as there's an audience and there's a speaker. And I'm not the only one. Every month there's another author who comes and speaks and shares, and they're all pretty good.
6 people from Spot here.
And there's 6 Sfatis in the room. Awesome. Who are they? Mordechai, Alina, Lorelai, you, me, and Sandy. I saw Sandy come in the door. Hey, brother. Yeah, that's pretty good. And if more of you would like to come and live in Sfat too, there's room. But at least come and visit. I make this pitch every year. Who came this year? I'll tell you who. Julia came. There you go. I'm looking around. I know you all want to come. It's just hard to get in. Elishama and Casey are going to come in October. Okay, so anyway, a little change of pace. Last summer, I think it was last summer, every summer we visit Yehudi's brother Marty and his wife Karen. They have a house in Newton, and they have a beautiful house on Lake Champlain on Shelburne Bay. And They like to take hikes. And I was having like a dry spell, poetically. And I decided to just see if I had any haikus in me. So it was either on the hike or when I got back, I wrote the first of these haiku. Broken wood, split rock. Hikers trudge along a path. Mountains loom, lake shines. Then I was sitting in the living room of their house, and again, taking in my surroundings. Tea bags in the cup. Someone sitting on the porch, sleeping in the sun. When I got back to spot, I kept writing haiku. I wrote this one. The sticky sidewalk where all the figs have fallen grabs my gummy shoes. Then I wrote another one. On cold curbs and walls, the alley cats are crouching, hunched up in their furs. Then I wrote another one. Guarding its dumpster, the wary cat waits for me and my moldy cheese. And there's one more. Maybe I'm loco, burning my hand on this lamp to wake a genie. So the first 5 of those have been published online, and I guess in print editions too, through haikujournal.org. So if any of you have written haiku or have written short poems that could present themselves to the public as haiku, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, they're strict about syllable count. You could actually send it to haikujournal.org if you have any, haiku in your back pocket or want to write some. It's a great exercise. And then I wrote 3 shorter poems that are haiku-like but are not technically haiku. And again, sort of based on observation. Sparrows pick at olives, doves peck at crumbs. I gather winnowing from the tables of the sages, morsels of wisdom, nuggets of truth. The sefer opens, the teachings radiate, the secrets remain unknown. And the last of these. The mind wanders. The soup boils over. We got to come to the States twice this year because my son got married. And we had met Casey before. And I thought I should really, write something for them. So I wrote this poem, Palindromes. Did I read this poem at the Shabbat on the 23rd of February? I don't think so. I read it at the wedding. So if those who have heard it before don't mind, I'll read it again. You know what a palindrome is, right?
Like the word mom.
Like the word mom. It's spelled the same forward and back. Quite right. And it's possible to construct entire sentences that read the same forward and back. For my son Elishama Chesed and his Kala, Chaya Shena. We are 2 palindromes, dad and mom and dad. Like Madam, I'm Adam, or Abel was I ere I saw Elba. Except here, when combined, the male takes primacy, and then reversed, the female does. But I think, that we are partners, equals, each with strengths, each with weaknesses, that the other helps shore up. As such, we blended our greatest strength, our love, to create the vessel that your soul was drawn to inhabit and to grow through from that day to this. Now you have completed over 32 years on the planet, symbolizing the 32 paths of wisdom, and have deemed yourself ready to take a wife, one with whom we too are delighted. As you go from strength to strength, know that our combined blessings go with you. So, thank you. Then we came to Denver, where the wedding was to take place, and we had a very nice meeting with Reb Zalman, But let me give me because our meeting was on Monday after the wedding, which was on Sunday. So Zalman made a Skype connection with Eli Shammai and Casey, and he spoke to them by Skype on Friday, I think it was. And then he came to the wedding on Sunday and came up for one of the Sheva Brachas. We have pictures. Yehudit has pictures of the wedding, which we'll show you later. Bless my grandson Ezra. And at our meeting on Monday, I asked him for a bracha. I wasn't asking for another kind of smicha, and I kind of wanted something for myself. When I'm with Zalman, usually it's like I'm thinking cosmically and universally, and I just felt maybe it would be appropriate to ask something that I could use, that would be, of benefit not only to myself, but that something from him that could enhance who I am. So he actually wrote me out a very beautiful certificate of esteem and empowerment. I don't think I'll read the whole thing. Anyway, it goes on. This is to certify, to honor and to recognize the Reverend REUVEN GOLDFARB, A.B., Rabbi REUVEN ben Yeshaya HaKohen. He has been the poet laureate for the religious movement known as Jewish Renewal, and who has been appreciated by people in other Jewish denominations. Therefore, we bestow upon him the title of Choser U'Meshorer, like visionary poet. His poetry is inspiring to the heart and soul of concerned and spiritual beings, as well as it is troubling to a mind that does not consider the beauty of the world and the joys and sufferings of others. His writings deserve to be published and disseminated because they are in the service of healing the planet and its life. Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shikmi.
The title that he grew.
Choser U'Meshorer. Choser is like the Choser of Lublin, the seer, a seer, and Meshorer is a poet. So the first poem I wrote after receiving this blessing is called Assumptions. And again, I wrote it up at Yossi and Rita's, where we stay when we visit the Bay Area. I assume that oncoming car with its blazing headlights won't veer into my lane. I assume that my wife won't leave me for another man or another woman. I assume that a meteor the size of Cleveland won't plummet into our nice neighborhood. I assume this hillside won't slide into the ravine. I assume one of its huge trees won't crash into our house. I assume nuclear war won't break out in the next instant. I assume this poem will never be published. I assume this poem will somehow get finished. Right about the first one. Okay, now we come to the poems I wrote at Kala. And with these poems, I'm going to include the reading. So I was in this class with Rachel Barenblatt, a poet and rabbi who's based in Massachusetts now. Lovely person, very fine poet. I recommend her book, 70 Faces. It's poems on the Parshiot. And the class was called Writing the Psalms of Our Hearts. So we read Psalms, we read translations of Psalms, we read psalm-like modern poems, and we wrote our own poems and shared them. There were about 20 people in the group. So the first thing I wrote probably isn't really a psalm. It's based on Eshes Chayil. And Eshes Chayil is recited on Friday night. It's the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. A virtuous woman who can find her price is far above rubies. Her husband's heart trusts in her, and he never lacks gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of his life, and so on. One of the traits of the Aquarian Minyan and of renewal generally, I think, is the way that we personalize the spiritual. And this poem is my personalization of the traditional Eshes Chayil. Eshes Chayil for Yehudit. My wife is exceptional, marvelous, amazing, in multiple ways and forms. She is devoted to her children and grandchildren, and certainly to me, her husband. She is devoted to serving Hashem and in discovering and perfecting ways of revealing God's genius. She discovers order in the universe and builds systems to express it. She shares her discoveries and methods with her students and friends and persistently practices to improve them. Her stately and graceful letter movements inspire others to connect to God as she does. She's unfailingly generous with her time and energy. She will hold a class for one person or several. She will rearrange her life and schedule to meet one person's need or timing. She touches base with relatives and friends. She fancies recipes and creates her own. She serves the fruit of her joyful labors to those who hunger for healthy food. She clothes herself in beautiful, colorful raiment to honor God, visible manifestations of Sephirotic permutations. She offers counsel and consolation to those bereft of hope, who have lost a loved one or have lost a sense of self. She encourages those who appear to be slipping and anticipates problems before they arise. She appreciates the good things in life and understands the necessity of occasional reverses. Seldom faced by setbacks and apparent misfortunes, she instead seeks the good in every situation, a teacher herself. She thus honors the great teacher of us all. So that was July 2nd. July 3rd, another poem. Each day, Rachel suggested prompts that we could follow. So this one is a warm-up exercise. She actually asked us to write a warm-up poem before we wrote the real poem. So this is a warm-up exercise. Remember, I'm at Kala, the campus of Franklin Pierce University, where Jody was. And who else in the room? Sandy? Marcia? UD? Okay. The Kala might be in Boulder next, or in Fort Collins next year. We heard from Jack Gabriel. It's a rumor. Just a rumor. We don't know. Warm-up exercise. Unfinished business, loose ends, commitments not yet followed through on, waiting for a time to be fruitful, to be completed, so that a new cycle of commitments can begin. That note to Avraham, that article to Chaya, that reference for Jesse, that forward for Mike, that reply to the Brazilian poet. Here at the Kala, my biannual Jewish retreat, there is less urgency in these demands. This world is not my usual world. My correspondents are far away. Their voices are muted and muffled. They cannot easily penetrate my cloud. I am wrapped in a New England fog. Okay, same day, next poem, this I suppose is the major poem, although I like both of them. It's untitled. It's but I think the title might be On Aging. Each day I notice my fingernails have grown longer, the green grass is taller, the paths more overgrown than the day before. My friend's hair is grayer, their children are brighter and brasher, their voices more confident, their cacophony more pervasive. And the walls are more crumbling. The blossoms are flying free, the sidewalk has cracks, the car fenders rust. The long days have peaked, the sun at its zenith declines, rain pours down, soaking into the earth, rivulets run down the hill, they carry the sand and the gravel away. Surely these cycles of growth and decay include me as well. My powers decline, despite the brightness of my eyes, the timbre of my voice. Do I exhibit more gravity or more flightiness in my bearing, my speech, my thoughts? Have I grown at all? Am I wiser or merely more clever? Am I more transparent to others than I realize? Do I know myself at all? Is it possible for anyone to know me truly? Is God my witness? Am I God's? Poems are great, you know? You never know where they're going to take you. You gotta trust. All right, this poem isn't the psalm either, but wow. I read this story on the internet. It was there for a few hours and it disappeared. It's there though. It's there still. You can look it up. But I won't tell you the story. The story's in the poem. Helpless. How does a family raise a killer? How does a son and brother slay his teenage sisters? What convinces him to round up 4 of his friends, put lethal weapons into their hands, and turn them on the 2 young girls who, dressed in their hijabs, clad in colorful, modest clothing, their flowing native dress, wearing broad smiles, whirling with giddy laughter in the rain, have allowed a friend to record their spontaneous dancing on her Android phone. How does he not see that they're engaging in harmless fun? That such expressions of joy do not shame their family, do not dishonor him? But, oh brother, oh son, how do thy actions shame thee? How does this murder of your family undermine the filial bond? And now, who would marry you? Who start a family in trust and hope with you? Assuming you are freed from prison in 6 months or a year, and your conspiring gang as well goes free. Did your culture egg you on to blight the generations your parents brought forth with you? Do you hate women, hate the feminine? Because, brother, son, you killed your mother too. What is left after the massacre? Okay, so Friday came around, and the theme was more like, a little bit more joy, a little bit getting ready for Shabbos. So the first poem I wrote on Friday was really mamish, a recollection of a Minyan Shabbos in the 70s at Yehudit's house at 918 in Sonata, before we were married. A Shabbat memory. The Minyan fills the living room. Our voices soar in unplanned harmony. As I turn my face to meet the faces in this room, to greet the spirits and the souls of every person present, I realize without a doubt the Shabbos Queen is present too, inhabiting the hearts of everyone and leaping forth from every eye. And what looks like the last poem in my sheaf, my Shabbos preparation. And this is how we make Shabbos in Tzfat. How wonderful to know that Shabbos is coming. How shall we welcome this honored guest? Early in the week, we already received requests for people who we know or friends of friends to join us for a meal or two, sleep under our roof. We have to plan ahead to shop and clean in preparation for two kinds of guests, human and supernal. On a good week, one on which I'm not working until the latest deadline, I begin on Yom Hamishi to empty the trash into a single plastic bag, collect the plastic bottles and the glass bottles for recycling, empty the kitchen waste into the compost bin, buy the bargain fish, and on Friday the fresh bread, the bioorganic mitzvah avim. We open the table, lay on it a new white cloth, put out Shabbos dishes and silver, put away the weekday craftsman's tools, sweep the courtyard, mop the floors, race to the mikveh, shower and dress, check the clock, light the candles. Breathe in the essence of this holy time and hasten to shul to chant and sing and dance. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Encore.
Okay, if you want an encore, I'll read the poem that appeared on the Minyan website and in the Chronicle, and not the Chronicle. It wasn't the Chronicle, was it? The J. Yehudit actually said you should prepare something for an encore. I said there will not be an encore. That's how much I know. I assume that little do I know. Okay, this is called Saw You at Sinai. Now, those in the know that Saw You at Sinai is the name of a Jewish dating website. It's also a turn of phrase. When you see someone that you connect with strongly or that you resemble, you might say, I must have seen you on Sinai. We must have stood next to each other at Sinai. You know? So, saw you at Sinai. Then you disappeared for 30 centuries. I remember your eyes, up-curved at their corners, your lashes, bashful curtains opening readily at my glance, your sleek body inside your robes, your incredible disappearing act between the time I turned away and looked back. Now you're at this wedding in Jerusalem. Your hair corkscrew curls, your smile elfin gleeful while chatting with your friends, other single girls like you, beautiful, young, in love with life. If I look away this time, will you disappear again? If I lost you for another 30 centuries, could I bear the separation? Don't you think we've waited long enough? Come home with me. No, better, let's build a home. A Bayat Ne'aman B'Yisrael, a faithful home among our own people. So that was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, March 15th, 2010, at Shulchan David on Har Zion, and the couple getting married were friends of ours, Yonah and Meir Chaim, and the Masader Kiddushin was Mordechai Zeller, David Zeller's son. One of my good friends and a real inspiration. So, come back next year, or if you want to experience last year, you can buy a DVD, and I'll send you a copy of the entire text, so that if there's any, difficulty making out what I'm saying, you can always read the words on the page.
Thank you.
B'vakasha. L'Shem Adonai, God of Yisrael. At my right hand Michael, at my left hand Gabriel. Before me goeth Uriel, and behind me Raphael. Above my head, Shekhinah El. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai.